Good evening, everybody. Buenas tardes a todos. Welcome to the March 2024 meeting of the Portside Steering Committee. Bienvenidos a la reunión del Comité Directivo de Portside de marzo 2024. We will get started in a few moments as folks trickle in. Empezaremos en unos pocos momentos hasta que se reúne todos nuestros asistentes con nosotros. Great. Thank you, everybody. And I see that Guillermo, our other interpreter, has also joined.
Wonderful.
Next slide, please. And now I'll hand it over to one of our great interpreters, Vicky, who will give instructions on how to access interpretation. Vicky?
Yes. Hello, I will begin in Spanish. Voy a empezar con las instrucciones en español. Bienvenidos sean todos por haberse reunido hoy con nosotros. Si usted quiere acceder a la interpretación simultánea al español y si están usando una computadora portátil o de escritorio, favor de localizar el icono con figura de globo en la parte inferior de la pantalla cuando este aparezca en un minuto y luego pulsen en Language Interpretation, interpretación del lenguaje y seleccionen el idioma español. Si están conectándose desde su teléfono, iPad o dispositivo similar, busquen el menú con los tres puntitos en la esquina superior del lado derecho de su pantalla y pulsen lo mismo, interpretación del lenguaje y luego el español. Esto permite que escuchen la traducción al español con un 80% de volumen y el audio en inglés se escuchará al fondo con un 20% de volumen. Tienen la opción de apagar el audio en inglés pulsando Mute Original Audio, ubicado en el mismo menú donde eligieron el idioma español. Gracias. Ahora voy a pasar al inglés. If you are joining this meeting and you want to understand anything that may be said in Spanish, and you're using a laptop or a desktop, in a few moments, a globe will appear at the bottom of your screen. Click on that and it will open language interpretation, and then you would choose the English channel. If you're using a smartphone, an iPad, or another similar device, please look for the three dots on the top right of your screen. Click on that. It will open to the icon of the globe. You click on that, and then you would click English. And that's how you choose to hear anything spoken in Spanish interpreted into English. And that concludes the instructions. Ahora vamos a esperar que se activen los canales.
Thank you so much, Vicky. Confirming that we have the interpretation channel now open for folks to use if they'd like. Ya tenemos el canal de interpretación abierto para usar como desea.
Searching.
Ana, can you confirm that the Spanish interpretation is coming out
Yes,
clearly?
it's working. It's working.
Thank you. Once again, gracias, Alisa. Once again, wanted to welcome everybody to our March meeting for the Portside Community Steering Committee. We have a relatively packed agenda, so we'll jump right into it. So for today's meeting, we will be receiving a quarterly update from the San Diego County Air Pollution Control District on community air monitoring data, with this month focused on metals data. Following that, we will be receiving an update from Caltrans on the Harbor 2.0 project, as well as considering a potential vote to consider a position around the alternative improvements selected by Caltrans and Sandag. Followed by that, we will be hearing from the California Air Resources Board's new evaluation study focused on the Community Air Protection Program. I won't walk through every item today. It's in the same order as I shared the objectives, with the only exception that before moving on to the presentation items, we will be going through our standard items, approving general meeting notes from last month, as well as tonight's agenda, which follows some general updates from Wait. And then just to remind everybody, we do have a few meeting agreements that we like to remind folks about. We would like to remind folks to please create space for everyone to contribute in our meetings. Step up if you haven't had a chance to ask a question or provide comment, and step back. You find yourself having provided comment already. We ask that only one person speaks at a time, and to please be muted when you aren't presenting or providing comment or questions. We ask folks to please listen to each other and respect each other's knowledge, opinions, and perspectives. We will do our best to be conscious of time and to please speak slowly and clearly for our interpretation to come through clearly for our Spanish-speaking community members and committee members. Right. Now I'll hand it over to my colleague Anna to go over roll call for the steering committee.
Great, thank you, Chewy. So we'll go ahead and begin roll call. To start off, Keith.
Present.
Thank you, Keith. Is Shelby also here?
No,
Okay.
I think I mentioned Shelby is my alternate at this meeting. So whenever I'm here, she won't be standing in for me. And that's the opposite is true for the International Border Community Steering Committee.
Sounds good, thank you. Jack? Jack. Massey?
Good evening, I'm here.
Good evening, thank you. Sarah?
This is Jack Monger. Sorry, I just joined.
Okay.
Thank
This
you.
is Sarah. I'm here.
Thank you. Lydia? Leslie? Leslie. Phil?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Tim?
I'm here. Mariella is not here at the moment, but may join later.
Thank you. Nick?
Here.
Thank you. Joy?
Good evening, I'm here.
Thank you, Joy. Martin?
Martin Weeder, National City, present.
Thank you. David?
David will not be attending.
Thank you. Roman? Sakya? Stephanie Yu? Jose?
I'm here.
Thank you. Diane? I see Diane.
I'm here.
Thank you. Nick? Nick
I'm
Critty?
here. Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you. Sergio? Jonathan Torres?
I'm here.
Thank you. Liana?
She is absent.
Okay. Filomena? Janice? I see Janice. Thank you. John? I see John. Hillary? Alicia?
Presente.
Gracias, Alicia. Margarita?
Presente.
Gracias. Naomi? Vanessa?
Here.
Thank you, Vanessa. Salvador?
Here.
Thank you. Montserrat?
Presente.
Gracias. Silvia?
Present.
Thank you. Ashley?
Present.
Thank you. Josephine?
Present.
Thank you. And Maritza? Let's see Maritza.
Oh,
Okay.
sorry.
Oh,
Can you hear
sí.
me? Sorry.
Yes, I
I'm
can hear
here.
you.
Thank you.
No worries. Thank you. Okay, and with that, we meet quorum status for today's meeting.
Great. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, everybody. Now we'll move on to our general updates and announcements. I did want to get started with Dinah, to just give us a quick update on her transition and representation for San Diego Gas and Electric.
Hi,
Dinah?
good evening. Hello, everyone. Good evening. This is Dinah Willier with San Diego Gas and Electric, and I just want to let you all know that I will be retiring from SDG&E as of April 19th, and my replacement is Jonathan Torres, who is currently on the line. And Jonathan, if you have just an announcement on our EV Fleet Day, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much, Dinah, and happy retirement. And welcome, Jonathan.
Thank you. I don't know why, but I'm unable to activate my camera, but I wanted to come on so I could so you guys could see me. But I did want to just make a quick announcement regarding EV Fleet Day. It will be on April 19th from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. It's our event where we do an exposition of solutions for fleet electrification. And we have original equipment manufacturers on site with various models of medium duty and heavy duty vehicles so that you can look at, and there'll be many vendors and exhibitors at our event. So if you could please join us, it would be great. Obviously, electrifying our transportation sector goes a long way to reducing emissions. So we would appreciate the support of the committee if they can join us on Friday, April 19th from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. I placed the actual webpage for the event on the chat. It's going to be held at our Century Park campus. For those of you that are familiar with it, it is basically on the corner of the 163 and Balboa, just a little further down on Balboa to the east. So I encourage you to take a look at it. The actual address is 8330 Century Park Court. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to me and contact me regarding that. Thank you.
Great. Now I'll be going down the list, starting with Sandag, followed by the Port, and followed by Nick at EHC.
Thanks, Chewy. So I actually have 3 announcements, but I'll try to be quick. First, Sandag recently completed the San Diego and Imperial Counties Sustainable Freight Implementation Strategy. We completed the final report. This has been posted on Sandag's website, and I'll give you the link in the chat. And so we appreciate everyone's participation and support on the project we presented to the Portside Community Steering Committee. And so thanks to everyone who contributed. Second, Sandag was awarded $11 million for the Harbor Drive 2.0 right-of-way phase via the U.S. Department of Transportation's Reconnecting Communities and Neighborhoods program. And Portside Community Steering Committee also provided a letter of support on this project. So thank you. And this award completes the funding package for the design and right-of-way phases for the Harbor Drive 2.0 and Vesta Street Bridge projects. And third, last year, we had received another award from the California Transportation Commission for $18.2 million for design and right-of-way. And that was through the Trade Corridor Enhancement Program. And so last week, the Commission approved the 2022 Trade Corridor Enhancement Program baseline agreement. And this agreement sets forth the agreed upon benefits, delivery schedule, project cost, and funding plan. So moving that forward. So thanks, and I will put those links in the chat. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm going to more about that from Caltrans as well. Now moving on to Phil, Port of San Diego.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. This is Phil Gibbons at the Port of San Diego. I also have a number of announcements tonight. I guess I haven't said anything recently, so a lot of things to talk about, but a couple of events coming out that I think are important for the community to know about. This Saturday, March 30th, the Port is hosting a Day at the Park event at Pepper Park there in National City. The event will be held from noon to 5 p.m. There's going to be a free shuttle for folks in National City to get to the event. That the shuttle stop will be at the library in National City, and we'll run to the park from noon to four-ish time frame. There's going to be performances by local artists and food vendors and a kid zone and lots of activities. So we encourage you to come out to that event. Again, that's on March 30th, this Saturday. Hope it doesn't rain. Another event that the Port will be hosting in April, on April 16th, we'll be hosting a career fair at the Port. So if any of you or your friends and family are interested in jobs along the waterfront, in the hospitality industry, in the shipbuilding and repair industry, et cetera, this is an opportunity to meet with about 30 of our tenants and Port folks who can discuss new opportunities along the waterfront. That event, again, is April 16th, and it'll be located at the B Street Cruise Ship Terminal on Harbor Drive in downtown San Diego. And then a couple of other things I wanted to mention. We've talked about the electric tugboat in these meetings many times. Our tenant, Crowley Maritime, actually received the electric tugboat finally. So this project's been in the works for, gosh, 5 or 6 years or so, when they announced that they were interested in developing one of the first electric tugboats in all of North America. I think this is the second of this type of piece of equipment, and it's situated right here in San Diego Bay now. It's located over at the 10th Avenue Marine Terminal. This electric tugboat is going to displace 30,000 gallons of diesel annually. So that's a big improvement to air quality in our region. This is a $30 million project or so. I know that the folks from the Air Pollution Control District contributed roughly, I think, around $14 million to this project. So it definitely takes a village to raise a zero emission tugboat, and this is a prime example of that. So thanks to everybody that was involved in that. We're excited about it. And last but not least, I wanted to let everyone know that a couple of weeks ago at the March board meeting at the Port of San Diego, we entered into an exclusive negotiating agreement with a company called SkyCharger to design, construct, and operate a zero-emission truck stop for heavy-duty trucks that visit the port. So this is an exciting first step to build the infrastructure that's sorely needed to expedite the turnover of diesel trucks to electric. So another project that we're really excited about. I'm sure there's a long road ahead. We have to go through the entitlement phase, still the negotiation phase. Our board wants to do a little bit more due diligence on impacts to the roadways, fire safety, as well as a market feasibility analysis for the site. But this is a really great first step to get infrastructure in the ground to support our aggressive goals to get to zero emission trucks. So that concludes my announcements for today. Thank you.
Thanks, Phil, and congrats on all the progress. Great. Now I want to hand it over to Nick at AHC.
Thanks, Chewy. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, so Chewy, this is somewhat of an announcement, more of a comment and consideration. So we have been looking at some kind of concerning things that are happening along the state. There's a multi-billion-dollar budget deficit, and we're concerned about funding for air quality programs like AB 617. And so I wanted to kind of elevate for the CSC and for APCD to consider maybe submitting some kind of letter urging the governor and the legislator to prioritize AB 617 and guaranteeing funding for programs like the Portside CSC and the AB 617 fund. Again, it's not necessarily an event or something, but maybe a topic of consideration for future meetings for us to consider submitting a letter in the future.
Great. Thanks for raising that, Mike. And yeah, we can certainly maybe for the April agenda have something for the committee to consider. Okay. I did have one more announcement, but I'm not seeing Amaya from CARB on the line, but I could be wrong. Not seeing Amaya. I'll just flag that Amaya is working with folks from the Community Engagement Subcommittee to do a video series highlighting community members that are part of the Portside Community Steering Committee. So she's coordinating with Maritza on that. So if you have any questions or would like to be involved, I can connect you with Amaya at CARB via email. Great. And with that, I think we can move on to our first agenda item, which is the consideration of approval of February meeting notes and tonight's agenda. Wanted to see if someone would like to make a motion in a second.
This is Sarah. I'll move to accept the minutes.
This is Maritza, I second.
And Sarah, does that include the agenda as well?
Apologies, yes.
Great.
I second that.
Thank you so much. We'll do a voice vote. So if anyone is opposed to the motion or would like to abstain, please raise your hand. Seeing none. Philip?
I'm sorry. I may have misunderstood what you said. Did you say raise your hand to vote yay or nay?
For nay or abstain.
I apologize. I'm going to lower my hand. I vote yay.
Great. Thank you so much, Phil. Great. And with that, we have a motion to approve last month's meeting notes and tonight's agenda. Thank you. And I would love to hand over to Mike over to folks at San Diego County Air Pollution Control District to provide an update on monitoring data.
Great, thank you, Chewy. Hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Kevin Bradley. I'm the senior chemist for the Community Air Monitoring Program here at the San Diego County Air Pollution Control District. And like Chewy said, I'm going to give a little bit of an update on our toxic metals program, which we started monitoring for just a little over a year ago. Next slide, please. So if you've seen one of these presentations before, we try to hit some key points, including what some of the sources are, the type of pollution we're talking about, the names of some of the different chemicals that we monitor for, what the health effects are. From there, I'll go into what the data has been telling us. Again, we have just about a year of data. There's some trends and some information we can pull out from 1 year of data, but again, a lot of these projects we really want to have in place for multiple years. So we'll cover what we can, and we'll kind of talk about at the end what future steps and future analysis we're going to perform. After I talk about the data, I'll kind of tie that back to the SERP and what some of the strategies are within the SERP that can help us lower the levels of these metals in the community. Next slide, please. So as far as some of the sources of airborne metals, kind of some of the typical stuff you see for air pollution, industrial activity, fuel combustion, I do want to highlight roadside dust and tire and brake wear for metals. I'll probably refer back to those quite a bit through this presentation. And then things like scrap yards and body shops, anywhere where metal is being impacted or exposed to high temperatures, things like that can release metal particles as well. Next slide, please. So as far as what metals we're looking at, I'm not going to read every last one of these metals to you, but this is the full list of the metals that we monitor for, and they're broken into 3 different tiers. Tier 3 metals all the way to the right tend to not be very toxic. They're more of the naturally occurring metals that are not really harmful to human health in the quantities you would, or the amounts you'd expect to encounter. Tier 2 metals a little bit more toxic. I won't spend as much time on them today in the interest of time, but in the future we plan to kind of circle back to those. But today we'll really focus on the tier 1 metals, the list of 6 of them here: arsenic, beryllium, cadmium, lead, manganese, and nickel. Next slide, please. So just to kind of dig in, again, not going to read every last word here, but usual suspects, things like fossil fuel combustion. For metals specifically, though, you have alloy production, different manufacturing procedures, waste management, waste incineration, things like that can release metal particles into the air. And a lot of these metals can be really hazardous to human health. And actually, if we go to the next slide, as far as why they're dangerous to human health, it kind of ties back to this picture in the middle, which I've had on, I think, all of the presentations I've given here, which compares the size of the particles that we're looking at to human hair and beach sand. And you can see that these particles tend to be much smaller than human hair. The cutoff that we're using for our sampling procedure is PM10, so 10 micrometers or less, so about 1/5 the width of a human hair. And as particles get this small and even smaller, they can get really deep into your lungs and your bloodstream and cause all sorts of health effects. These health effects can include different types of cancer, neurological issues, respiratory effects, along with a lot of other different harmful outcomes. Next slide, please. I know I'm going kind of quickly. I have kind of a lot to get through here. So, okay, so as far as these metals that we look at, the vast majority, what the slide is saying is that the vast majority of the metals that we're collecting are things like sodium, iron, calcium, a few others that are not typically particularly dangerous at the levels that you're going to encounter. Sodium, you can see, takes up more than half of this pie chart here. I apologize, the numbers are not on there. That's an oversight on my part. But sodium, of course, comes from salt water, among other places. And so being here in San Diego, we're going to get a lot of sodium collected on our filters. But I do want to draw your attention to that little yellow wedge, which is our other category. That represents about 4% of all of the metals that we monitor. So it's actually a pretty small sliver. But that's where you're going to get those tier 1 and tier 2 metals that are going to be a little bit more of concern as far as health effects and whatnot. So if we can go to the next slide. So there's a quick mistake on the slide along the vertical axis there. That should say percentage of total, not the average concentration. But basically what we're looking at on the slide is if you take that 4% wedge from the last slide and break it down by individual metals, these are the percentages of each of those metals within that slice, essentially. And I highlighted the tier 1s that we're going to be talking about today in red here. So beryllium, very, very low, very small amount of beryllium in these samples. Cadmium, same thing. Arsenic, manganese, nickel, and lead a little bit higher. So we'll talk more about those. But really all this is to point out that this is a small subset of a small subset. So these levels are very, very low, and that can create a lot of trickiness as far as monitoring these and making sure that we're reporting accurate numbers when we give presentations like this. So that'll be particularly important with arsenic, which I'll talk a little bit about later. But if we can go to the next slide, please. So as far as where we're monitoring, these are the 6 sites where we monitor for metals at the moment, 4 in Portside and then 2 closer down by the border. So Sherman Elementary School in Sherman Heights, Chicano Park at the corner of Logan Ave and Cesar Chavez, the Marine Terminal on 10th Ave, and then the I-5 on-ramp at Boston Avenue. So you can kind of see those abbreviations in parentheses. In the interest of space on these slides, we're using a lot of the site abbreviations. So I apologize. I try to avoid abbreviations as much as I can in these presentations to avoid confusion, but there are a few in here. And then San Ysidro and Donovan State Prison down closer to the border in San Ysidro and Otay Mesa, respectively there. Next slide, please. So this just zooms in a little bit on the Portside site, so you can kind of get a sense for where these 4 monitoring sites are. Josephine, I see your question. I want to acknowledge that. I will get back to your question at the end. Next slide, please. Okay, so kind of a lot going on in this slide. So what I want to point you to first is, or just kind of describe what we're seeing here. So these bar graphs are telling us what the average level was for each of these metals at each of our sites in 2023. So for example, for nickel at our Donovan site, DVN, our average for 2023 was around 2.7 nanograms per cubic meter. So what that number actually means, we compare that to 2 levels. One is the 1 in a million cancer risk, and the other is the non-cancer risk. So the 1 in a million cancer risk essentially means that if 1 million people were exposed to that level for 70 years, you would expect 1 person to have cancer from that exposure. And then the non-cancer risk, what that one means, it's a little complicated how they calculate that, but essentially anything below that level you would not expect to cause adverse health effects besides cancer. So there's one that's specifically about cancer, and the purple line is specifically about other health effects, not including cancer. So that's kind of what we're looking at. The dark gray represents the average or the mean. The light gray represents the median. Reason we put both, I won't get too deep into the statistics here, but the average can be pulled much higher and much lower by extreme values. So it's nice to kind of have the median on there as a check of, okay, so Donovan, for example, for nickel, you can see that the average is much, much higher than the median. The reason for that is that we have some really extremely high values at Donovan relative to, some of the typical values that you would see. So it kind of pulls that average higher, even though the median's a little lower. So anyway, I won't get too deep into the stats again. As far as, what we're looking at, and again, you can see arsenic in the bottom right looks like it's of concern relative to the cancer risk. If you bear with me, I'm going to talk about arsenic more on the next slide. And the other 2 metals along the bottom there, beryllium and cadmium, are just at really, really low levels. So I won't spend a lot of time on those 2 metals either. The 2 metals that I do want to draw your attention to outside of lead, which tends to be much higher closer down by the border, are nickel and manganese. So nickel and manganese tend to point to effects like traffic and like construction. So if you see the nickel level at Boston Ave is higher than any of the other Portside sites, and the manganese level at our Boston Avenue site is higher than any other sites in San Diego County. So in 2023 at our Boston Avenue site, we actually did have a ton of construction going on near that site. And so it looks like we've captured that in the data. So as we get into 2024 and that construction kind of wraps up and concludes, we want to see, okay, do those levels come back down? If so, then that would point to construction as probably the culprit for why those levels were high. If not, we need to look more at the traffic because that is a really, really busy on-ramp. And so a lot of the vehicles that are entering the freeway there might be responsible for those emissions. Next slide, please. Okay, so a lot going on this slide, similar, but I'll kind of walk everyone through this. So first of all, if you look on the right side, it says note missing October through December 2023. That is actually not true. We got our data package in just about a week or 2 ago, and we're able to incorporate that here. And then I just forgot to remove that text box. So you can ignore that. All the 2023 data actually does include the full year of last year. So that's the first thing. So what's happening on this slide is similar. Each bar is showing you the average for that individual year. So nickel, from 2014, 2015, 2016, and then we skip to 2020, 2023. Reason we skip a few years there, we had a monitoring site at Perkins Elementary School from 2014 to 2016 where we collected metals data. Then we were kicked out of that site. Eventually, a few years later, we got our site going at Sherman Elementary School, and we've been monitoring metals there ever since. So that's why there's a bit of a gap in the data, but just to kind of look at the historical trends, we wanted to, include that Perkins Elementary School data so that we can see what's going on over a long period of time here. Okay, I promised I would talk about arsenic. So it looks, according to this graph, like our arsenic levels are going up and up and up, but that is not the case. What happened was that as we expanded our amount of sampling and we added monitors at a bunch of different sites, we were collecting more samples than we were able to process in our own facility. So we set up a contract with the laboratory to send our samples to so they can analyze all of our samples for us. And right at that time, we started seeing arsenic get higher and higher and higher, and not just on the samples that we were sending them, but also on the blank filters that we were sending them. So a blank filter in theory should have nothing on it. And so if we're seeing high arsenic levels on a blank, what that's telling us is that there's some kind of contamination in the system, probably in the analysis instrument. So we're still trying to figure it out and rectify that problem and work with our contract lab to get our arsenic data back on track. But unfortunately, we don't really have a lot of useful arsenic data at the moment. So hopefully in the future, we're able to kind of revisit arsenic and dig in a little bit more to what's going on with that particular metal. Beyond that, though, the other thing I really wanted to draw everyone's attention to with this slide, again, if we look at nickel and we look at manganese in 2023, we see a pretty substantial decrease. Again, this is only at Sherman Elementary School, but we see those levels go down quite a bit from one year to the next. So what we want to figure out is that decrease going to be sustained at all of our other sites? Because we only collected historically at Sherman and Perkins Elementary School. The remainder of our sites, we started at the beginning of last year of 2023. So we don't have multiple years of data at these other sites. So what we want to determine is, are the levels that we're seeing decrease for nickel and manganese at Sherman Elementary, is that also happening at other sites? And it'll be particularly interesting at our Boston Avenue site, because that's our site that we saw really high values for those two chemicals for 2023. So that'll be something to keep an eye on. Again, it's just going to require us to continue to monitor, continue to sample, and generate data so that we can, again, evaluate these trends, evaluate the strategies that we're putting into place to try to lower the amount of metal particles that are getting into the air. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time here. Time of year for things that for particulate matter type of pollution, the effect tends to be that in the colder months you have higher levels and in the warmer months you have lower levels. The reason for this is that cold air tends to stay more compressed and it doesn't mix as much. And then in the warmer months, air is able to expand and mix, and that mixing kind of lowers or moves the pollution away and spreads it out more so that it's not as high of a level. And we're largely seeing that here. I know this is a very busy slide with all the different colors and everything. But if you just look at lead, for example, and you can just look at the Donovan bar, the dark blue bar, you can see that it's higher in the winter, highest in the winter, high in the fall, and then a little bit lower spring and summer. And so that's typical of what we would usually see with particulate matter. Other than that, we do have a little bit of San Ysidro data, which kind of continues to point to the border region as a little bit more concerning for metals than the Portside region. Again, with the exception of nickel and manganese, particularly at our Boston Avenue site, which we talked about previously. Next slide, and actually skip the next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, so as far as how the SERP strategy is going to affect our ongoing metals analysis. So I know I've talked about zero emission vehicles in my presentations in the past. There is a kind of a weird caveat with electric vehicles, because obviously electric vehicles are great for a lot of reasons in terms of emissions. But I mentioned earlier that one of the sources of metal particles is tires and brake wear as they get kind of degraded as a vehicle operates. And electric vehicles in particular are much, much heavier than your traditional gas or diesel powered vehicles. And so heavier vehicles can be a little bit more, constrain tires and brakes a little bit more. And so it'll be really important as we start switching over cars and switching over trucks to more electric vehicles to see, okay, is that leading to any sort of increase in metal particles that we need to be concerned about or not? We don't know right now. It'll depend on different technologies, and we can't really forecast that very well, but it's just something to kind of keep in mind as we continue this program. Of course, truck rules and regulations will help as well. We have trucking routes to try to steer trucks away from schools, away from parks, things like that, as well as model year requirements. So we want to make sure that trucks are using the latest technology in their engines to reduce emissions, increase inspections, things like that, to make sure that we have the best trucks that we can possibly have as different port procedures and processes are continuing. Land buffers is another SERP strategy that can help, once particles are in the air, it can help kind of filter them. Trees can act as a natural filter for particles. So things like that can be helpful. If we go to the next slide. Couple more SERP strategies here. So transportation improvements, which is, things like improving the walkability and bikeability of different neighborhoods. If people are able to walk and bike more, it can reduce traffic. Improving public transit is kind of the same train of thought, same logic there. And then just changing the way that streets are managed and stoplights and stop signs and different ways of making traffic less intense in the neighborhood can help as well. These heavy duty vehicles like trucks tend to have worse emissions when they're idling and driving slowly than obviously if they're driving faster and they're getting out of the neighborhood more quickly. That would be ideal. We've talked a lot about air filtration systems for homes, for schools, and wherever we can get them. Those are great. I believe I hope in the future we'll probably have an update on the PAIR program. I don't have one at the moment, but I know that was able to get a lot of filtration systems out to the community. And then I know this is kind of redundant emission reductions as a strategy under the community emission reduction program. But if you go to those specific actions within the SERP, G1 through G8 and H1 have a little bit more detail as far as what some of those emission reduction strategies are. So encourage you to check those out, or you can feel free to reach out via email if you have more questions. Next slide, please. So as far as kind of your day-to-day actions that people can take, again, using public transit or biking and walking, if you're able to, can be great for reducing the amount of traffic. And you know, part of the SERP is improving residents' access to things like this. So hopefully, as more and more projects go into place, we create neighborhoods where this is more feasible, where there's public transit options, where there's bike lanes, good sidewalks, things like that. As far as your home, you can ventilate your home during warmer hours. That's when your particulate matter levels tend to be at their lowest, when the air is mixing really well. So it's a good time to get some fresh air in your home. And then on the other side of things, if you're sitting in traffic, maybe keeping your car windows closed, having recirculated air on, things like that to try to reduce your own personal exposure. Next slide, please. So as far as future actions, and actually before I go to these bullet points, I'll answer Josephine's question now. The reason that we're not collecting National City, we are actually close to getting 2 sites opened there in National City. I don't have the map included in this presentation, but we are working on getting some procurements done for the land use and fencing and all the stuff that we have to build to be able to put our monitoring station in. So I'm hoping that within the next few months that we are able to start deploying equipment to our National City sites, and I will figure out how to communicate those dates to everybody as soon as I have a little bit more definitive information around that. But anyway, so sampling at additional sites when available, of course, we want to get sampling going in National City as soon as possible, and continue monitoring at the sites that we already have to continue to collect good data. We also want to work with either our engineering team or other agencies to not just report what the levels of these chemicals are, but sort of apply a weighting factor. So it's not just the level, but it's the toxicity rank along with that level. So we can kind of understand how this is really directly affecting health rather than just what the actual raw numbers are. So that's a little bit more meaningful for someone who wants to understand how this is affecting their lives. Also, we'll include more analysis of some of the other metals that I didn't get to talk about too much today, some of those tier 2s, and just continue to explore other ways of collaborating, making this data more publicly available, trying to perform some source apportionment in collaboration with other agencies so that we can try to better understand where these metals are coming from so that we can reduce the amount that they're getting into the air. Next slide, please. So my contact information, as well as that of my supervisor and our deputy director, are on the screen here. So again, please feel free to email me if you have follow-up questions. We might have a couple minutes here for questions right now, but in case we don't have time to address them right now, please always feel free to reach out and email and ask whatever questions you have. So that is the end of my presentation. And yeah, if there's any questions, please. Jack, I see that your hand is up.
Yes, thank you, Kevin. That is probably one of the most helpful presentations that we've had in a long time with regard to understanding risk levels. Could I ask you to go back to the slide that says EPA, comparing 2023 to EPA health risk levels? Yeah, right before that.
Yeah, one slide, please.
There you go. Exactly. So is it fair to say that we are seeing a reduction in emissions as you look at the emissions of each of these? Actually, no, that's my question for the next slide. I guess the question here is, can you go to the next slide? Sorry, I got twisted around here. There we go. So is it fair to say that for nickel, lead, manganese, from 2020, in other words, when the sampling started at Sherman Elementary, we are seeing a decline, a steady decline, or a steady improvement, I guess would be a better way of saying it, in the levels of these chemicals?
I would say that it's hard to definitively say yes. I mean, you can see the averages are lower, especially if you look at 2023 for nickel and manganese. Now, there can be reasons besides just the emissions going down. There can be weather effects, for example, if it's a particularly rainy year, or if the prevailing wind is pushing pollution away from our monitors or things like that. There can be other effects. But I mean, it is really encouraging to see that the averages certainly don't seem to be going up, and in a lot of cases seem to be going down. So, you know, again, I mentioned briefly that the median can be kind of interesting to look at too, that kind of eats out some of the outliers or some of the extreme values, and they more or less reflect the same trend. So that's helpful too, that, you know, even when we get really high polluting days, it's not dragging the averages up or down more than it should be. So again, I don't want to definitively say yes, we're crushing it, but the 2023 data, particularly for nickel and manganese, is encouraging. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I agree that we're not crushing it, but we're definitely seeing a trend maybe. Will we get to that point down the road where you will be able to look at the results of the sampling and say yes or no? If the trends that you're seeing are a factor of increasing emissions or decreasing emissions without having to factor in things like weather and all those other things, will you be able to separate it out and really say how are we doing here?
Two pieces to that. One, we do collect meteorological data at Sherman, so we can work with our Met team to try to dig into that a little bit more and see if you know, if the metals are tracking pretty well with just default PM 2.5. That might give us a better idea if, you know, if PM 2.5 is coming down and metals are coming down, then that's telling us, okay, we're probably doing something well here. So let's dig into that more and see what is happening in and around Sherman Elementary School that is helping us get those levels down. The second part to your answer, as far as kind of discounting weather effects, I think it's, you know, if you see, you know, 3 years, 5 years where we're seeing these sustained decreases and averages that tend to stay lower than previous levels, then yes, I would say that we can more or less definitively say that that we're seeing the correct trend, the improvement, like you said.
Oh, okay, terrific. And just one last quick question with regard to if you lived around Sherman Elementary School, given the EPA levels that were shown on that slide, what would you say is the risk that's occurring there? Because they're almost all below the red line or the dark line or whatever. Is it actually in a zone such that a resident doesn't have to worry about the impacts of what's being measured there because it's not above the EPA limit, or what?
But yeah, if you can go back a slide, Shui, or whoever's controlling the slides.
Yeah.
So that orange line, I'll kind of restate the definition there. That level at that orange line is saying if 1 million people were exposed to this level for 70 years, you would expect one person to contract cancer from that exposure. So you can see that we don't exceed that. Besides nickel at Donovan, that's the only place where we're exceeding that on average. So what that tells us, it's not really a limit. It's just telling us that you would expect fewer than one person in 1 million to contract cancer. I know there's no such thing as fewer than one person. So another way of thinking would be, okay, if you're up at 10 million people, is it one person? Is it, you know, somewhere between 0 and 9 people would be expected to get cancer? So again, I don't know how well you can extrapolate an exact quantitative number to say, you know, boom, we're at 5 people per 10 million. I don't know that the math really works out that way, but it's just kind of a guiding number and a chance to say, you know, hey, there are chemicals that we should really prioritize. So diesel particulate matter, for example, which we spend a lot of time on, some of those numbers are exceeding certain standards. And so maybe we put more funding, prioritize those more, wrap our SERP strategies around diesel more than we do around metals. If we're continuing to see metals stay below these standards, then maybe we need to reprioritize ourselves around other pollution. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah. Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Jack and Kevin. Did want to raise a couple of comments before moving on to Jonathan. just Margarita reiterating that, agreeing that there should be monitoring in National City, and that hexavalent wasn't addressed.
Yeah, I rehearsed this a couple times today. I meant to say something about hex chrome. I see David Soderman came off mute. David, do you want to handle the hex chrome question?
Yeah, I'll answer that one. So we are measuring for hexchromium. We started measuring that at Sherman Elementary School in, I think it was July of 2023. We have not looked at that data. That's something that we will be looking at shortly. There is some hexchrome is hard to measure accurately, but that is something that we're looking at, and we will be reporting back out to the community at some point in the near future.
Thanks, David. Jonathan?
Just a quick question. You'd mentioned that even though the efforts to electrify transportation do remove emissions, of course, because of the batteries and because these vehicles are heavier, they are producing increased levels of certain compounds. I forget which ones you said specifically, but due to their braking. Has that been proven conclusively? The reason I ask is because uh, when I speak to people in the industry, they typically indicate that because electric vehicles are using the regenerative abilities that come with braking, the actual brake pads that electric vehicles use are used less often than your traditional internal combustion engine vehicles. So, would you happen to have a comment on that?
Yeah, it's a really great question. Great points there. And yeah, I appreciate that you mentioned the regenerative braking thing. So to kind of restate what I was trying to get at is that metal particles can be released from the wearing down of tires, of brakes, things like that, and that even those zero emission vehicles, they're called that because they don't use fuel, they don't use gas, they don't use diesel fuel, and so they're not producing the byproducts of those fuels when they're performing, when their engines are running. However, they still have tires and brakes, and because electric vehicles tend to be heavy, if the brakes are being strained more, it's possible that more metal particles could be released from their brakes and tires if there's more strain. Now, you made a really good point that the regenerative braking is a way of kind of getting around that problem. So I didn't mean to indicate that electric vehicles are definitely going to release more metals. That's not the case necessarily. It's just that could be a potential caveat to sort of zero emission vehicle strategy, is that we need to make sure that we're continuing to monitor metals as we switch over to electric vehicles to make sure that we're not going to see increases in certain types of metals. As far as which metals, I don't have a list in front of me. Believe something like vanadium and barium, which are in the tier 2 section, are a little bit more common in your tires and in your brakes. But I'd have to kind of dig more into that and get back to you. But yeah, really great points. And again, I'm very pro zero emission vehicles. It's really important to continue to move our cars or trucks, everything over to those. So I did not mean to indicate that that's not a good idea in any way.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Before moving on to the next, I just wanted to raise two comments in the chat from Nick at some of the air toxic hotspot facilities in Barrio Logan. Hexchrome was a huge contributor to cancer risk from the facility. It'd be great to see what those trends look like in the future. And Joy Williams reaffirming it would be informative to list hexchromosome with the tier 1 metals, even if data is community.
Yeah, I definitely should have at least mentioned this a little, because hexchrome, we're using a separate instrument, and it's a little bit of a separate project from the rest of the metals to do the hexchrome analysis. But yeah, I mean, to Joy's point, it is a very toxic chemical. It's really a important chemical for us to monitor in terms of its cancer effects. as far as why we didn't put it in with the tier ones, the tier one designation comes from kind of an EPA list of these are the tier ones, these are tier twos. So I just kind of had those listed as far as our program. But yeah, hexchrome certainly a very important chemical. And like David said, we're going to get through that data and give an update on that as soon as we can.
Great. Thanks so much, Kevin and David. Now want to move on over to our next agenda item, which is the Caltrans team providing an update on the Harbor Drive 2.0.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Chuy. Thank you for the committee for having me provide this presentation. I presented this first about 6 months ago, and prior to that, our partners there in Sandak made a presentation on this project. I'm again Jose Luis Robles. I'm a project manager, South County Trade Corridor, Caltrans District 11. And I'm going to be talking about the Harbor Drive 2.0 Vesta Bridge project, port access improvements. This project has two components, one of them being the Harbor 2.0 component, and the other one being the Vesta Bridge. And together, these two components complement each other to make a project in the aims to improve multimodal access there along Harbor Drive and the working waterfront. Next slide, please. Why am I here? Well, a couple of reasons. I presented the project, like I said, 6 months ago. And I just wanted to provide the committee an update where we're at with the project and what are going to be our next steps as the project moves along. We were lucky enough to complete the environmental process actually late last year, sometime in December. And we're getting ready to move into the next phase, which would be the design. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'll talk about the first component, which is the Harbor ITS project, or Harbor 2.0, as is better known. And in this portion of the project, our partner Sandag is going to be the lead agency for the design. We're going to provide some support for the civil transportation engineering component, and they're going to take care of the ITS improvements. And they're also going to be the lead agency for any right-of-way or utility relocation that occurs as a result of the improvements. What the project is proposing is dedicated truck lanes on Harbor Drive in the southbound direction. It goes from the 10th Avenue terminal station all the way to Sampson. And as Harbor Drive moves more further south, Bayshore Bikeway has limited space. And so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be managing the traffic there using truck-only lanes during off-peak hours. Along the way, on certain signals, we're going to install freight signal prioritization technology that allows for freights to move along the corridor in a more efficient manner, similar to how buses get signal priority at different locations in the city. This will work very similar. And the goal there is to make sure any freight that goes from the 10th Avenue terminal station all the way to the National City terminal down in the south is moving efficiently along that corridor. One of the goals is to minimize the time that the freight component or freight modes are idling on red lights. And the sooner we get them out, the better it is for that corridor. We're going to be installing new traffic signals at different locations on Harbor Drive, as well as location there on 8th Avenue in National City and on Main Street in San Diego. Next slide, please. What are additional features that we're also going to be installing is geofencing for freight. That's going to be on the I-5 itself and I-15. basically it's a way for us to incentivize trucks to use the facilities that are designated for their use to access Harbor Drive. The access routes from the freeway to Harbor Drive are denoted there in green. There are 28th Street, 32nd Street, and 8th Street. All the other streets that are there are not designated for truck use, so we want to incentivize trucks to remain on those facilities only. We're also going to implement a truck reservation system with our partners there in Port of San Diego to make sure or to see if a reservation system can help with the congestion and improve the mobility for freight along that corridor. We're also going to be adding or contributing some ZEV funds, some funds for ZEV infrastructure, partnering with our port for any ZEV components that they want to be involved on along that corridor. And finally, we're going to be also implementing some improvements on 28th Street on-ramp to facilitate freight mobility as it moves from Harbor Drive along 28th Street and goes northbound on the I-5. Next slide, please. Okay, what are the benefits of this? Harbor Drive right now, Sandag is working on an effort to install bike lanes on Bayshore Bikeway. I think they're almost done with those improvements, and that's made a big improvement on Harbor Drive. But we feel like we still need to be able to manage and develop a system so that we can provide some sustainable freight corridor along Harbor Drive. So what this project is going to do is going to provide us the ability to manage, have a managed lane system along Harbor Drive, so we can make most efficient use of the space. We're going to be installing ITS technology to help us manage the flow of traffic, allowing us to have multimodal capabilities of managing multimodal modes of transportation along Harbor Drive, improve first and last mile connections, and provide complete street enhancements. We're enhancing about 25 to 30 intersections for complete streets. And we're going to be enabling safe access to transit and active transportation by improving some pedestrian facilities. Next slide, please. Now I'm going to be talking about the Vesta Bridge project. And this component of the project works well with the Harbor 2.0 because what it does, it separates any additional flow that comes from a Navy facility that's existing, that is moving from the dry side of the base to the wet side of the base. The dry side of the base is considered the area between Main Street and Harbor Drive. That part of the base is mostly for residential folks. There's bowling alleys there. There's also a hotel. And then the wet side of the base is the side that's connected to the harbor itself. That facility is mostly for where the working personnel goes to work from the Navy. And right now, the only way to get to the wet side is either through the city streets, through Wabash Boulevard, 32nd Street, or 8th Avenue. Folks that are staying on the dry side or access the dry side, in order for them to get to the west side, they have to use local roads, exiting Norman Street, Wabash, and connecting and entering the gate on Harbor Drive. With the proposed Vesta Bridge project, what it does, it provides many options to Navy personnel to access the wet side prior to even entering Wabash or 32nd or Harbor. It provides the ability for them to enter the base along Main Street, and what it does is it helps us relieve some congestion there on Harbor Drive and 32nd Street. This project is also going to be widening a portion of the I-15. We're going to do some pavement rehab improvements on Vesta Street and Main Street, also along the intersection of Harbor and 32nd. Finally, we're going to be installing freight signal prioritization also on 32nd Street to facilitate the movement of freight as it moves along out of Harbor Drive and into our freeway systems. Next slide. What are the benefits of the Vesta Bridge project? Well, the benefits is that it provides some relief on 32nd Street and Harbor Drive, and allows for multimodal access or improvements along that region of Harbor Drive. Vehicles that are now entering the base have different options of entering the base and not impacting the streets on 32nd, along 32nd and Harbor Drive. Next slide, please. Oh, okay. Okay. Okay, so it's going to improve freight mobility for the Port of San Diego and adjacent waterfront businesses. Like I mentioned before, it's going to relieve some congestion, and it's going to improve mobility along the route. Next slide, please. This is a simulation that we've developed in the environmental phase of what the Vesta Bridge will look like ultimately, along with the Harbor 2.0 improvements. The gantries have changeable message signs that will inform the public of how we want to manage the traffic. If you look on the on Harbor Drive itself, this is looking northbound on Harbor Drive. Basically, the lane going northbound in the median is going to be an off-peak truck lane for trucks only, and in the south, heading in the south direction, it's going to be a truck only lane in the medium area as well. But as we move along from a truck only lane to a combined or off-peak truck only lane during off-peak hours, will inform the traveling public that change is occurring through the use of the changeable message signs. Next slide, please. All right. I see a hand raised. Keith.
Yeah, thank you. You may have already covered it. How far, I guess, is that east or south does that go along Harbor? Is it going even to the convention center?
Yeah, on the south end, it goes all the way to Civic Center Drive on Harbor Drive.
Okay. I just want to flag, I think I did this before. I know this Harbor Drive 2.0 project has been on the books for a long time, but I just want to make sure that all the folks at Sandag are aware of the work that NCTD and BNSF are doing on the development of the future convention center train stop that will extend the terminus of their heavy rail line from Old Town, or sorry, from what's the name of our big train stop, all the way to Convention Center, Santa Fe Depot. So this means that there's going to be some significant realignments of our bike cycle track. Much of it is in BNSF right of way. And so we're in current discussions with them about how to realign those bike paths, but they have signaled to us that because they own the property, there may be some significant loss of cycle track. And so from a bike perspective, I just want to make sure that Sandag is looped into all of those discussions with BNSF and NCTD.
Keith, are you referring to the convention center in San Diego, the one on by the stadium, Petco?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, we're familiar with that improvement. That's yeah, we're starting on the just south of that 10th Avenue terminal station, right before that bridge that goes over the Harbor Drive Bridge. I don't know if you're familiar with that location, but yeah, we're aware of that project. But thank you for bringing that up.
Sure.
And we'll definitely share it with our Sandag friends.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Jack.
Thank you, Jose. Did you say that there was freight or items being hauled or trucked, I should say, from 10th Avenue Marine Terminal to 24th Street Marine Terminal and National City Marine Terminal?
No, what I meant to say is that the concept is a haul road that serves the working waterfront.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. No more questions from Keith? Okay. So the current funding. The project has been funded all the way to design and right of way. This is the funding that we received for design. It was TCEP for Vesta and right of way capital and right of way support. The amounts of 6.7 million for capital, for right of way capital, 6.5 for design, and 1 million for right of way support. The port provided us a regional match for that, and we really appreciative of the port. For the harbor, Port of San Diego, for the Harbor 2.0 side of things, we received 6.5 million for design, and the CTC approved the baseline agreement March 22nd. So we're moving forward to file the mechanism to provide us the funding and make it available for us. Hopefully, we can start design sometime this spring. And lastly, our Sandag partners applied for the Reconnecting Communities and Neighborhood Program, and they were just awarded 11 million, making this project fully funded up to construction. We'll move to the next slide. Okay, so the final environmental document for this project was completed in December 21 of last year. There was a public outreach meeting on the I believe it was the 2nd of November there in Cesar Chavez Learning Center on Cesar Chavez Avenue. There was approval of the TSEF funds that I just mentioned on the 22nd of May. And the next steps is to begin the design in this spring. We're looking to seek letters of support from the various planning groups of the region to see if we can, because we're going to be looking to apply for the construction funds. Shalom, you have a question. You might be on mute.
Thank you, Jose. This is Shalom. I'm wondering if you can go back to the slide where it shows the benefits, and then it has a diagram, like on the ground diagram of the project itself. Go back. I think there's a different slide that has it. I think, yeah, this one here. Yeah, so thank you for this presentation. One of the questions I had for just kind of clarity, and so that folks can also understand in the kind of where we are in the process and as it relates to alternatives. I know that the CSC has been very supportive of Harbor Drive improvements in general, and with the EIS being completed a few months ago in December of 23, there's one alternative that emerged from that process, which I believe is this kind of diagram here. That particular alternative, I believe, has an added lane, which is that truck only lane that you see kind of on the left-hand side there. Because currently I believe there are 2 lanes going in each direction. So 2 lanes going west and 2 lanes going like east southeast on Harbor Drive. And so the alternative that was selected in December as part of the EIS process has an added lane. And so I just want to raise that just to make sure folks are aware. And one, I'd like to know in the EIS or how Caltrans and Sandag have accounted for induced demand as a result of that added lane. And the concept of induced demand is essentially if you add a lane, you're actually increasing the amount of vehicles that are going through a thoroughfare. And that could potentially, particularly if vehicles are not zero emission vehicles, that could potentially increase the air pollutants and the emissions within a particular corridor because you're actually creating more space for more vehicles to go through. And so I'm just wondering in terms of how Caltrans in the selection of this particular alternative through the EIS process back in December, how they accounted for induced demand and its potential impacts on air quality because of the added lane instead of doing a lane conversion of an existing lane for truck only use.
Thank you for the question. It's very similar to a managed lane project where even though a new lane is being proposed, it's not really adding capacity to a corridor, because what you're trying to do is to accommodate or manage the traffic for multimodal purposes. So, very similar to adding a bike lane, for example. When you add a bike lane, you are widening a lane, you are widening a facility, but you're providing room for another mode of transportation. But our environmental process did look at the air quality component of what this improvement would create or have impacts on. And I'm not the expert on air quality, and I don't think it had any adverse effects in that regard. Otherwise, I don't think we would have been able to approve the environmental document. The additional widening for the truck only lane occurs mostly on there's a piece on the north side between 10th Avenue and Sampson, and there's a piece on the south side between 32nd Street and Civic Center Drive. And in between there, we are doing what you're describing, where we're taking an existing lane, kind of taking it away from regular vehicles and making it a truck only lane, but only during off-peak hours. Off-peak hours.
Yeah, and I would disagree slightly on a point in terms of it is actually increasing capacity for vehicles, particularly for heavy duty trucks. And I would disagree that it's not similar to a bike lane in the sense in terms of increasing capacity because of impact in terms of air quality. But no, I appreciate you answering those questions and just providing a little bit more clarity and description of the actual configuration of the lanes that I don't think has had as much attention in previous conversations that I think would be important for this group to take into consideration, given that this is an alternative that emerged from the EIS process that was finalized in December of just recently, a few months ago, December of 23. And as folks kind of look at this and move forward to, I think everybody wants improvements on Harbor Drive, but just kind of take into consideration the particular alternative that is moving forward.
Yeah, and if your team wants to see the progression of the project, we have several documents. We have the Harbor Drive study, multimodal study. We have the PID that was prepared by Caltrans. It was the PSR PDS. and the project report that pretty much completes the environmental process. Throughout the whole time, there's only been two alternatives. It was this one and the no build alternative. Those are the only two alternatives that have been around all along. Nicholas?
Yeah. Hi, Jose Luis. Thank you for the presentation. So just kind of a clarifying question. This truck only lane, is that only going from north to south under this proposal, or is it kind of both ways? There'd be a designated heavy duty truck lane.
Good question. It's north to south between 10th Avenue and Sampson, and the piece south of 32nd. It's just a little bit south of 32nd, where there's enough room for it. It's in both directions. Well, I saw another hand.
Yes, this is Jose Marquez from Caltrans. I also want to give some background for the newer members of the steering committee. This project was included in the SERP as one of our action items, and is action E3 is to support dedicated truck route to avoid traffic impacts to local community. When we're identifying the different solutions and actions as part of the SERP, Caltrans and Sandac, we propose this concept with the Port of San Diego. Like Jose Luis was mentioning, this concept was the initial concept was identified years ago in a multimodal study that the Port of San Diego led, and then eventually Caltrans took the lead with the project initiation document, and we've been collaborating with the Port of San Diego and Sandac on this project. When we were identifying solutions, one of the things that are the community back when we were like developing, like identifying solutions for the traffic, truck traffic in the community, was to like just get out all the traffic, all the perceived truck traffic from the port outside of our local streets, and actually just have them use Harbor Drive as the main truck route to help address the impacts of truck traffic in local streets. That's one of the rationale to support this project as well.
Yeah, this project will achieve that, Jose. One of the reasons is because once we implement the FSPs, it will not allow or essentially restrict left turns if you're heading southbound in the southbound directions on all the streets where currently freight accesses Barrio Logan. We, as part of this exercise, on the environmental document, we did some truck counts, and we still found that some trucks on Harbor Drive heading in the southbound direction make lefts on all various streets along this corridor, primarily on Cesar Chavez. And there's another street just a little bit south of Samson. Forget the name of it. It starts with an S. It's a interesting name, but yeah, there's currently there's a number of intersections where trucks and heavy trucks still can, or even though it's not a designated truck lane or route, folks are still able to make a left into the Barrio Logan community. As we implement this project, the signals are going to restrict those moves for freight. It's still going to allow for passenger vehicles, but it would be an illegal turn for freight.
Thank you. Maybe we can move on to the next slide since I know Jose just wrapping that up.
Correct. That was, I think that was his last slide. So, any questions?
Can I see? Maybe Jose, you were going to add something. Jose Marquez.
One last thing in the second bullet.
Yeah, that's right. I didn't finish this slide. You're right, Jose Marquez.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we are not funding in construction, and so for construction, so we are going to be trying to obtain future grants, and we are going to be looking for letters of support from various planning groups. We were thinking we got one from your group in the past. I'm hoping to get a new one for construction. We're set to begin construction September 2028, and then end construction in May 2031.
Okay. Thank you, Jose Luis. On that note, we did include a potential action item to the agenda around this project. So as Jose Luis and folks have mentioned, the committee did approve a letter of support last year specific to a grant that Sandag was applying to. At that stage, I believe the project was still described to the committee more generally, and now that more details have been decided on, we wanted to bring it back to the committee to learn more about the specifics about the project, the alternative that were selected to that was included in the environmental impact study. So we would, wanted to open it up to you all for consideration of approving these alternatives that were the alternative improvements that were selected by Caltrans and Sandag. And this would signal to both Caltrans and Sandag to prepare a letter of support template that they would like you all to consider at a future to use for future funding opportunities more generally, rather than coming to the committee every time there's a new grant up.
Sure.
Anything
Also,
to add? Yeah.
Yeah. Also, just to give some background on why we're requesting this is there's a number of funding opportunities, either state or local funding opportunities for these type of projects, and the the time to like submit a grant application is usually just a couple of weeks, and there's times that we have missed an opportunity to actually to include letters of support because of the short notice from these grant programs. So that's why we are requesting if we can have like a letter support template that we can use for future funding opportunities.
Yeah, that's correct, Jose. Yeah, these grant applications are coming really fast. We do have a short period of time to reach out to the planning groups and request for letters of support, almost making it impossible for you guys to provide one for us. So, we want to thank you for the opportunity to present today, for listening to us, for your questions. But yeah, it would really be beneficial if you are supporting the project to have something in place so that if we need something from you, you guys are not scrambling in the last minute putting something together. Most of the committees that I've presented to do require some sort of vote, and so it's we put you guys in a tough spot when we say, can you provide us a letter of support within a week or 2 weeks? So having in place something already would definitely be beneficial. Philip.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on that. I think I support that I guess I don't know if we're calling it a motion, but I would support that motion to create a letter template so that you guys can continue to seek funding for this project in an expeditious way, with perhaps an addition that the Portside steering committee could be notified when you're applying for that grant and using that letter, so that we're aware of the grant that you're going after and that you've used that template on our behalf. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a little onto that. And along with being notified when the letter is being used. I mean, in general, I think we all want this the Harbor 2.0 to go. I just personally fear that if something gets changed in the actual plan, and then we're not notified about that, it makes me feel a little iffy. So if, I understand that as you're looking for funding, there's times where maybe a certain funder wants to see something specific and you can alter it to actually accommodate to that funding. If that does become the case, I would like to know that those changes are made so that we're still in alignment of supporting that those efforts.
Thank you.
Makes a lot of sense.
Nick, followed by Keith.
Yeah, from the city of San Diego's perspective, I'm not sure where this suggestion goes, but I'll just share it. We have run into the same problem of how a lot of this federal and state grant funding comes down very quickly, and so it's very difficult to mobilize letters of support in an efficient way. So we have put together a regional group of I think there's 14 or 15 entities, public agencies and nonprofits that sit on this regional group that talk about grants on a regular basis. And so when a big project comes down and they want to collect a number of letters of support quickly, we usually just put one big regional letter out there with everybody's letterhead on it, and then we pass around the template at that time. And it usually makes things much faster for us to share with all the folks who want to be on that letter instead of funders seeking these individual letters. So in the event that AB 617 CSC wants to be part of that regional group in those discussions, it might be a way for us to track individual grant applications that Caltrans and Sandig are going after in a more efficient way.
Thank you for the notification, Keith. Just wanted to check with our interpreters. It sounds like the Spanish interpretation isn't coming through. Oh, I see she's come back. Thank you. Great. Did want to raise a couple of comments and then move over to Nick at HC. Janice just reiterated, I do not feel comfortable with an approved blanket letter of support without our notice. I would want notification every time with advance notice.
Yeah, Chewy, I just kind of wanted to chime in on the proposed amendments, and I appreciate Shalem kind of elevating the concerns with the amendment. And just kind of a question for Chewy and the facilitators, would it be possible to make this vote through email or like at a later time? I don't feel comfortable supporting this without being super clear that it isn't going to add to the pollution issue in the port side. And so if this lane is going to increase capacity for more cars and potentially more traffic and pollution, I don't feel super comfortable voting on this right now. So I'd like some time to kind of follow up. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm landing right now.
Thanks, Nick. And yes, just to remind folks, there isn't a letter right now at all to vote on, because we do have a protocol established in our charter that we need a letter sent to the committee a week in advance before voting. So we thought this would be a good initial step to discuss how to handle a template letter, which we haven't done in the past. But appreciate everyone's feedback on things to consider on how we handle these requests. Keith, I think your hand is still raised from earlier.
Sorry.
Oh no, no worries. Great. So in terms of next steps, I heard a lot of great feedback from the team in terms of wanting to learn more about the project, and also comments on how we would handle template letters in terms of being noticed about changes to the project that a grant might need. Just notices about any type of letter is used. So those are definitely things we'll need to consider, whether and how that can be more clearly noted in alignment with our charter. Great. And I do remember, Phil, you had a motion on the floor that may not have a second or be applicable at this stage yet. Could you remind me what your motion was?
I'm sorry. Are you asking me what the motion that I put on the table was? Okay, I thought there was an initial motion to approve developing a letter, like a letter template for this project that Caltrans and or Sandag could utilize when going after grant applications. And my addition to that motion, which I thought was on the table, my addition to it was to include some language that says that the Portside Community Steering Committee should be notified of the grant opportunity that Caltrans or Sandag is going after.
Got it. And so I think the only thing I would note to clarify your motion and be in alignment with the charter is that the letter would need to be brought back to the committee for a vote before it's utilized.
Got it. And remind us, Chewy, in the charter, is there something about letters for support letters, for grants or for other issues? Can that be sent via email and voted on via email by the group? Or does it have to come to a steering committee meeting?
It can be voted over email. We did include that.
Okay, so it sounds like what Caltrans and Sandag, and I'm lumping in Sandag here. I don't know if that's appropriate or not, but I'll just say it that way. So does Caltrans and Sandag need to submit a letter template to this group that we should be considering?
Yes, if that's the direction you'd like to give Caltrans and Sandag.
Yeah, we could definitely do that.
I mean, I think that's up for discussion among the committee. I mean, I think that's what I would suggest, that a letter be generated so that we can get our eyes on it and can then vote via email.
Okay, we could do that.
Thank you. John, followed by Keith.
Let's see, am I
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I would tend to agree. I mean, it's kind of like too much, too fast, and trying to wrap our head around it. And I just don't want our group, our membership, to one day be put in a situation where it looks like we made a mistake. And I think we need to abide by our bylaws and by our sense of good business practice in order to accomplish the true goals of this committee, which is to serve the community as a whole. So I would tend to agree with several of the folks who, yeah.
Thank you. Great. Keith?
Maybe just a point of clarification. So and maybe you touched on this, but the fundraising for Harbor Drive 2.0 on the design, is that continuing or are you funded for the design at this point?
We are completely funded for the design.
Okay.
So we're seeking funding for construction.
Okay. So if you're funded for design, there will be a point when the design is fully complete and that is no longer needing funding. The grants that you're talking about going out for are construction capital implementation grants. But at that point in time, the project is fully designed and the scope of the construction will not change. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So I'm not understanding the hesitation of the group to wait for every grant application that's being pursued if the project will not change after 100% design. Can someone speak to that?
Diane?
Hi, everyone. Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the commitments that Caltrans made to the committee, to the Portside committee here, was to move forward with the Boston Avenue project and the Harbor Drive 2.0 projects in order to facilitate lowering emissions in the community. And so at this point, to say that you're not sure if we're in alignment with Portside CSC, it doesn't make sense. This is a commitment we've made in the SERP to lower emissions in this community.
And I think Hans been speaking, but I saw Maritza first, then Sal.
Thank you. And thank you, Keith, for that clarity. I think that realistically, not everyone is fully aware of how grants, the process is. So the confusion can come from the lack of knowledge in that world, especially from community members. So yes, thank you for that clarification, because I think that at least on my end, I also, it's not easy to trust. As a community member, it is not easy to trust, even if it's in writing. We have seen it happen many times before, that things do not happen the way they are written down, and we do not always see all the things that are promised to us. So I think that us not fully being okay with it right away and saying, yes, let's just make this letter and be okay with it being signed and used every way possible, those concerns that we will then not see the promises be made the way that they were promised originally, and it would start changing to then come what comes to fruition not be in alignment. So I just wanted to amplify that aspect as a community member. We're not always in spaces where we have that background and how the system works. And how grant funds come into the community, because unfortunately we don't always get to see see that money or actually have it to our advantage. So thank you for clarifying that. And also just hope we can acknowledge that we're not all in the same level of understanding of how these systems work.
Yeah, and I just want to respond to that. I totally get that, and my comments were independent of whether this group should move forward with a template letter for all future construction grant applications. I get the trust issue, and just as a matter of policy with the city of San Diego, we also do not endorse a blanket letter for all future grant. We need to be approached every time someone wants a grant application letter of support from us per funding source. So that I don't think what CSC seems to be leaning toward is unreasonable or unprecedented in any way. I think it's pretty normal to want to see those requests every time.
Great. Thank you, Maritza and Keith. I'll move on to Salvador, followed by Joy, followed by Jose. And I would like to move on to our next agenda item. It doesn't sound like there's unanimous or strong support for this, so we'll come back to it at a future meeting on how to handle these sort of requests. So,
Yeah, so thank you, Trudy. I think that the points have been made very clear that these support letters should be presented to us in the first place. I know that it came about last minute, and I would agree that if both parties, Sandag and Caltrans, want to put a letter together to kind of start giving us a direction to work with, that'd be great. And at the same time, some of the clarification questions that were made of the project 2.0, Harbor Drive 2.0, can be solidified in the meantime as well. Because I do agree with the fact that, added traffic is added. It has an added environmental impact, and if we don't have those measurements, then we could be going in the wrong direction. Although Harbor Drive 2.0 has been on the discussion for a long time, and we dealt with it through our SERP, but it doesn't mean that we blanketly agree with every single adjustment or change. So I would just put out there that those two parties or those two entities can start writing something up, and those questions that were made through the process of the presentation can be addressed. And I think that at the end, we can potentially have a letter of support that we can review and potentially endorse prior to seeking the funding that may or may not come down in time. That's all.
I'm not hearing you, Joy.
Yeah.
Oh.
So I think basically in agreement with everything Sal just said. It's true that the SERP has been, in favor of Harbor Drive 2.0 from the beginning. And I hope that, we'll be able to continue to be in support of it. But I do feel like we need to follow up on the concerns raised tonight about induced demand. And I think that's why we're hedging and saying, well, we want a little closer review before we're ready to sign on support. And looking for some more time there to make sure we're clear on what we're supporting before we sign on to anything. So that's my perspective.
Thank you. Marquez and Jose Luis?
Yes. I think, well, we really appreciate about the comments on the project, on the process. I think we can, draft a template for consideration. And also one of the things that we can also do is every time we're going to go for a grant application, we can share the proposed template to the committee. Sometimes, like I was mentioning, there's not a lot of time to submit these grant applications. So if I really it was good to hear from you, Shui, that you mentioned that that the committee can also vote on these letters of support via email. So that actually can help us with the time. Usually, like you said previously, Shui, to put an item on the agenda is we have to submit it a week before the meeting, and And usually we have a meeting once a month, and so that's, yeah, sometimes the time frames don't align. So if we can be able to, if the committee can vote on each template or each letter of support for each grant application that we submit via email, or if the time frame doesn't align with our scheduled meeting, I think that we can work on that as well. So I think that can work for us.
You have that. I do want to be mindful of time. Any last minute comments before I hand it over to our other presenters?
Sure. Can I ask a question really fast? Yeah, I think I agree with Jose. Once we put together the letter, we include the language that you guys need to see in regards to how the managed lanes work, that it doesn't increase capacity and that it helps trucks move more efficiently without idling. How quickly can we get a letter back? Does it need to go to another meeting that you guys have here and go to vote? What should be my expectation or our expectation?
Yes, so right now the charter allows for email voting on time-sensitive items, which include letters. It requires the voting period to be open for a week for CSC members to respond over email. So I think a week would be the minimum turnaround time, but realistically, I think we should consider additional days for buffer.
Okay, so it won't require an additional committee meeting for a vote. It won't require that.
No, if it's a time-sensitive request.
Okay. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for your feedback. That's really helpful because, yeah, this may not be the first time we get a request for a template written. This is our first one, I believe. Did want to quickly hand over the mic over to our last presenter, Nicole. Next slide, please. To just give a quick update overview about an evaluation study they're conducting for this program.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. So good evening, everyone. My name is Nicole Bruns. I am an air pollution specialist at CARB. And thank you for allowing me to come and speak with you. I'll try to get through this as quick as possible, just for, an essence of time. But yes, tonight I'll be speaking to you about the evaluation of the Community Air Protection Program established under AB 617. Next slide. So why are we evaluating the program? We're beginning the 6th year of implementing community air protection programs, and it is critical to uplift the lessons learned and assess the impacts of the program. It's also a commitment in the Blueprint 2.0. As you can see on the slide, it's indicated by Goal 5. Findings and learnings from this contract will identify lessons learned, unanticipated benefits, and outline key barriers to be addressed for future implementation, especially across more communities throughout the state of California. The recommendations from this evaluation will be applied to the ongoing work of both CARB and air districts in all pathways established in the Blueprint 2.0. Next slide. So how does this evaluation build on prior studies? We will be summarizing past evaluated efforts in this contract, especially looking at the UC Davis evaluation and how we can build upon that without duplicating efforts, as well as utilizing best practices from that evaluation and other evaluations such as the Transformative Climate Communities Program and other similar environmental justice place-based efforts. We will be utilizing 4 different evaluation metrics, such as baseline evaluation, which will look at past studies, analysis of primary source data, process evaluation, which will distill lessons learned, outcome evaluation, which will look at the extent to which SERP goals and objectives were achieved, and then also piloting short and immediate impact evaluation, such as looking at emission trends, exposure, and economic benefits. This will all then provide an overarching recommendation for the evaluation framework, as well as to other communities. So how does this differ from past evaluations? It's going to be CARB-led, led by the California Air Resources Board. The focus is going to be on the initial year selected communities' progress over the last 5 years. And that we will also be establishing a design team that will encompass multiple members from CSCs, the air districts, and CARB over the entire, I guess you could say throughout the state of California, the ones that are first year AB 617 selected communities. That will then lead into direct community involvement, which will hopefully enhance program to tailor to local needs, as well as help shape better guidance, program improvements, and new ways of working with communities for statewide implementation. Next slide. So this evaluation can help answer some overarching questions, such as how the Community Air Protection Program has advanced equity, what strengths of the program should be replicated, how shortcomings should be addressed, and how the evaluation can be incorporated as a central feature in the CAP to continuously improve the program. The evaluation is a comprehensive look at processes, results, strengths, and challenges of working together to realize the goals, actions, and targets set forth in the SERPs of the communities that this evaluation will be focused on. And then it would also include an assessment of overall impacts of the program that go beyond the SERP commitments, as well as recommendations to be incorporated in the evaluation moving forward. Next slide. So through this contract, we'll be establishing a design team of up to 11 members from the air district, CSCs, and CARB that I had mentioned. This design team is going to help arrive at a consensus on goals and objectives of the evaluation that will then feed into the development of the evaluation framework. As you can see on the screen, we have about 5 communities being shown. These communities are part of the first year of selection, which will also help ensure appropriate amount of depth and research and focus per community. There will also be 1 community per air district. Each community that is also shown on this slide is a SERP, and some of them might also have a community air monitoring protection or program component to it as well. Also, each one is eligible for the process outcome and preliminary impact evaluation metric that I had just mentioned a minute ago. And then as you can see under each name is individual pollution types or sources of pollution, as well as in some cases identified areas of concern within the community. So the anticipation of this evaluation is to select communities that can highlight a singular pollution type or source of concern, and then an associated strategy and action that goes with that. So that way this evaluation could be well-rounded and also comprehensive of each community. Next slide. So just real quick about the contract, there is a partnership with UC Berkeley, University of Southern California Equity Research Institute, San Diego State University, and UC Santa Cruz. There's about $625,000 budget with additional funds set aside for community compensation. And it is going to be about a 3-year contract anticipating to start in April 2024 and last until April 2027. Next slide. So real quick, some of the major tasks and timeline. In year 1, we will be establishing the design team and summarizing past evaluative efforts. Going into year 2, we will be developing the evaluation work plan, which will include the 5-year 2018 or year 1 selected communities with input from the design team. We'll engage focus communities to seek input on goals and objectives. as well as establish a shared understanding of evaluation metrics and conduct focus groups to collect surveys and additional information. Compensation will be provided for these focus groups. Year 3 will lead right into the final report, looking at all of the evaluation metrics and the recommendations to then share into a single final report, which will be shared with the design team and the communities that participated in the evaluation. That will then incorporate any feedback from that and develop 2 reports. One will be a short version for the broad audience in mind, and a second longer version that will be geared towards those who are engaging at a technical level. Next slide. So action items for the CSC. Please prepare any questions you may have for me. Again, I am the staff lead for this through CARB. Let me know what your interest is in participating, and then as a CSC, nominate a member for the design team. Again, it's up to 11 members with 6 of those seats for CSC members, and then the remaining 5 will be kind of divvied up between Air District and CARB. Compensation is going to be provided for the design team, and then there will be up to 3 meetings in year 1 to kind of provide feedback on draft materials. Next slide. So following this meeting, please think of who you would like to nominate as a design team member. You know, collectively, we'll be reviewing and compiling community-specific info. There will be a project kickoff meeting, initial meeting, and then, of course, we'll get to begin work. And then I think the final slide is just contact info. Yes, so I am the staff lead for this evaluation through CARB. Please reach out to me if you have any questions. I know we're kind of over by 2 minutes now, so hopefully I didn't go too fast and kind of like spit a bunch of info at you. But my email is on the screen, and I look forward to working with you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. I do want to be mindful of folks' time. If folks have questions, I think feel free to email them to me and Nicole, and I can share out answers from those questions to the group, so everyone's informed on the questions. I think my main question, Bill Peter, is when you would need the nomination from the which member for the CSC on the design team. And if that's just thinking about future agenda items to make that nomination a formal item.
Yeah, so I believe Shandon is also on the line, who might have a little bit more info about exact like timelines.
Yeah, thanks, Nicole. Yeah, hi, folks. Good evening. This is Chandan Misra here, my manager here in OCAP. But yeah, Chewy, like, to answer your question, like, if you can maybe start thinking about it, like, over the course of next few weeks and maybe add it as an agenda item, for the next CSC meeting, I think that'd be great. We'll be like kicking off this particular contract, as Nicole mentioned, like sometime in April. So hopefully, we can have like the kickoff meeting and like also like convene like a design team, hopefully like sometime over like maybe like, I don't know, like June or July timeframe, if things go as planned. So yeah, I mean, if you can insert like an agenda item for maybe the next CSC meeting, that'd be great.
Thank you. It's really helpful.
And we can always set up a follow-up meeting, you and I, to kind of go over any more additional information as well, or clarification.
Excellent. Thank you so much. John, maybe we'll take your question before we close out our meeting.
Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, I'd like to get some additional information in regards to what would be required, if you will, if someone wanted to go ahead and join that group, and as to the details of it. Okay. talking about design, but so do you need an engineering background or whatever? You know what I mean?
No, I would say probably like the main criteria is that you're either a CSC member, Air District, or CARB. Sorry, my computer just went off. But the design team is going to be comprised to basically help make come to a consensus on like the evaluation framework and like the draft and what kind of goals and objectives and looking at the evaluation metrics, how that kind of fits in with the for instance, this community, Portside, EJ. And so yeah, I would say that the main criteria is, either being a CSE member or from the Air District.
Yeah, my thought is that because we have AB 617, but if it's CARB, that's at a state level, if you will. And I just wondered exactly what kind of background you might want an individual to be. Having been a government contractor before, I know some of the complexities, but then I would consider joining that group.
Yeah, no, that'd be great. I mean, the way that it looks right now, we have about 5 communities and 6 seats reserved for CSC members. So that's at least 1 member per community from the CSC, and then maybe one CSC community might have, or a committee might have an additional member. But I've written your name down. Feel free to put your email in the chat and I'll grab that as well. And then when we follow up, yeah, definitely keep your name on the radar.
Great. Thank you, Joanna. We want to be mindful of folks' time, so I think I'm going to move on to closing out our meeting today. Thank you, everybody, for your participation and great discussion today along all the items today. If any questions come up about any of the agenda items and you don't have contact for anybody, feel free to email me and I can connect you to the right person. We'll also be sure to share meeting highlights in a few weeks with the meeting recording. Thank you, everybody, and hope everyone has a great evening and rest of the week. And as a reminder, our next meeting is April 23rd via Zoom.
Good night, everybody. Buenas noches.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Buenas noches.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Chewy.
Thank
you.
Have a wonderful evening, and remember, happiness is a choice, even on a busy, bad day.
Thank you.